Synthesis Pioneer, a short story prequel to the novel Synthesis Weave, written by Rex Dean, narrated by Rex Dean. The first thing that hit Calendula was the smell. As she had boarded the Fluorescent Lightingale, the odour reminded her of an elevator shaft, oily and metallic, with a grating edge that perfectly matched the clanging and sparking noises of a shipyard. The ship's long corridors had initially been cold and unwelcoming, echoing with an unfurnished hardness and a throat-biting smell of fresh paint. Her personal quarters hadn't been much better, at least until the journey to Gliese 682b was underway. Once the engines fired up and the reactors reached full capacity, the rooms had slowly warmed with the excess energy, and a steady tingling thrum ran through the hull as though the craft were alive. As Calendula lay in bed, the sounds now provided a small measure of comfort, but not enough to give her a good night's sleep. It must surely be the middle of the night. Computer, what time is it? Oh, 4:50, replied the synthesized female voice. Christ. She rolled over, felt for the glass of water on the bedside shelf, and drank it down in almost one gulp. Is Malcolm still working? One moment. The computer paused for a second, presumably to work out to which Malcolm she was referring. Malcolm is presently located in the infirmary. Good. Call him, please. A faint beeping came from the wall-mounted console, and several seconds later a soft, well-rounded African voice came over the comm. Hello, Clen. What are you doing up this early? I can't sleep, Malk. You know what it's like. It's not the same without Nell. I miss her. Do you want something to help you sleep? No, it's fine. I think I'm just worried about things. Do you want to talk about it? Not right now. Over breakfast, maybe. I'm working in the mess hall this morning, so after that. I'll see you there. The comm fell silent to leave Calendula with the sound of her own breathing, the thrum of the engines, and her thoughts. Eventually she drifted off, to be gently woken by the faint twittering of birds, her alarm. After washing and pulling on her overalls, she made her way out into the corridor where the bustle of early morning ship duties was already beginning to take place. Pine-scented detergent brought a momentary pang for the woodlands of home, a sharp reminder of her walks with Nell. As she ran her hand lightly along the brushed metal wall, she kicked a trailing cable. Another reminder of the accident. A brief surge of panic gripped her, and she nearly turned to go back into her room. No, people were waiting for her. She too had duties to perform. Her thoughts drifted back to the last conversation she'd had with her cousin back in 2042, before the ship had begun the slow acceleration to near light speed. You'll do fine, Stephen had said. You're a great cook. You can work miracles with tofu and hydroponic veg with the right herbs. I can't help feeling I've been quangoed, you know. It's not like they really need me here. I just got the job because I'm related to one of the project leaders. I'm not qualified. They don't even need a linguist for space exploration. But you can cook, and you're great with people too. Besides, isn't working in the mess hall the best place for a linguist aboard a ship with a multinational crew, when half of them can't speak a common language? Who else do they expect to stop the bar fights? Calendula had laughed at that, but it hadn't alleviated her feelings of inadequacy on the mission. To her, the conversation had been only weeks ago, but Stephen would have now forgotten it. To him it would have been 19 years. The breakfast shift in the mess hall was mercifully short. The only reason she'd accepted the assignment was for the variety of aromas it afforded. There was only so much oily metal and warm plastic you could endure. It was also the same for her love of the hydroponics bay and the small arboretum. The scent of fresh growing things brought back memories of home like nothing else, except for Nell. After breakfast, Malcolm led Calendula through the maze of corridors, passing through the arboretum en route to the infirmary. The smell of fresh basil and the tang of tomatoes conspired to make her feel hungry, even though it was only minutes since she'd eaten. As they made their way down through the decks, the stairs rang beneath their feet, and the temperature slowly dropped by 1 or 2 degrees. Malcolm's voice and his arm, looped through hers, provided warmth enough to warm off the slight chill. You've been quiet this morning, Clen, Malcolm said, his voice becoming muted in the long corridor. I have a lot on my mind. Calendula didn't want to talk about her insecurities with him. Not yet. He squeezed her elbow. Come on, it might help us talk about it. I miss her. Nell, I mean. That's understandable. I can't help feeling as though it was my fault. Malcolm's voice softened. You weren't to know the cable was live, and it was a maintenance worker's fault. He should have made sure you knew it was there before you came out of your quarters. That's what worries me. I don't feel safe anymore. Left here. Malcolm turned a corner. Things will get better, I promise. Beep, beep. Calendula's wristcom made her jump. "Calendula, I need you on deck," came the captain's voice. "Now?" "Yes, now. And Malcolm, if he's there with you. I need all officers." "On our way," Malcolm answered for her, and grabbing her by the arm, he dragged her along the corridor to the nearest stairwell. She had to put her free hand against the wall to keep from falling over. His pace was so frenetic. "What could it be?" she asked. "To want all officers up there now?" Malcolm's breathless voice lowered. "Something important." When they arrived on the bridge, the sounds of chatter between nav and comms officers were unbearable, with each calling instructions and speaking out streams of numbers that meant nothing to Calendula. "We're here, Stan," Malcolm said, gulping to get his breath back. For the chief medical officer, he didn't seem to be the paragon of fitness himself. The captain, Stan, took Calendula's hand. "I'm glad you're up here so quick. It couldn't wait." What could require the immediate attention of a linguist, even an amateur like herself? "We picked this up 5 minutes ago, Clen. Thought you might be able to make some sense of it." Again, she wondered what could possibly exist in deep space that she could help with. As though reading her thoughts, Stan activated a console, and a high-speed chittering sound, not unlike a pulsar signal, played. "Obviously this is the raw recording. It's high-speed because of blue shift, which means we're approaching it. We're decelerating and we'll be able to see it in a couple of days." Calendula gripped Malcolm's arm tighter. "See what? You're scaring me." Stan slowed the playback until the sound became more distinct. Voices. "An alien ship," he said. Calendula reeled at the news. Officers' voices echoed in her head and her pulse raced, drowning out the meaning of the words. "You want me to what?" Stan repeated his previous statement. "Speak to them, if you can." I... She put a hand to her throat. The air had suddenly become dry and hot. "I need water." Someone handed her a glass and she gulped it down. "I'm not qualified for this." "For God's sake, Clen, you're the only one qualified. That's why we brought you along. The geeks at the International Space Agency thought there might be a slim chance of alien life out here. Better to have a gun and not need it, than to need a linguist and not have one." "Precisely. They weren't going to send us out 16 light years without preparing for every eventuality, were they?" "I guess not." "So," Stan said, placing a set of headphones in her hands, "will you give it a try? We'll arrive in 2 days." With her will bolstered by the realization that she'd been brought along for a legitimate reason, she smiled. "Fine." She went back to her quarters to concentrate on the work, listening to the transmission. Segments of the strange, guttural, almost animal noises were repeated, as though whoever was at the source had somehow detected the Fluorescent Lightingale in flight and was perhaps trying to contact them. Most of the sounds were distinct, forming speech patterns that she could easily reproduce herself with little to no vocal gymnastics, even though she had no idea what they meant. She dictated notes to the computer, paying particular interest in the stresses on the vowels and the way certain consonants seemed loose. "These beings sound as though they have large open mouths," she said, while the computer recorded her observations. "I can hear things that sound similar to older languages from Earth. Commonalities with Sumerian and, oddly, Old Norse. It's a ridiculous notion, I know, but given no other frame of reference, I don't know where else to start. I'm the first person ever to attempt translating an alien language." The next day, the ship reached the heliosphere of Gliese 682b and slowed considerably. They would shortly begin their final approach of the targeted survey world. The trip, while intended to be a longer stay, would be cut short, however, because the electrical cable that caused Nell's accident had also sparked a fire in the food stores. The crew had fought to save a portion of it, but not enough for them to live off for the duration. The planned months-long research would have to be cut short to a matter of days if they were to survive the return trip. There was just one snag. The signal they picked up was coming from near this very star. Calendula lifted her head and turned to face the door as Malcolm entered. He wore distinctive sandalwood aftershave. "I think you should take a break from your work and come to the infirmary with me," he said. "There's someone who wants to see you." She felt a knotty chill in the pit of her stomach as he once again led her along the corridors. As they descended the stairs, the air cooled again, and Calendula shuddered, pulling her cardigan close around her neck. "Cold?" Malcolm asked. "It's all the same temperature down here, Clen." "Just nervous, I think." Malcolm squeezed her hand. "I know how you must feel." The faint beeping of machines greeted them as they entered the infirmary. Floral disinfectant with a hint of violets and an edge of alcohol, a combination that made Calendula's stomach quiver. "Over here." Malcolm guided her through the doorway into a quieter room. A warm biscuity odour, a familiar one, made her relax a little. Faint rustling, followed by a quiet whimper. "Nell!" "Easy, girl," Malcolm said. "Just here." Calendula crouched and reached out with her hand. Her wet nose smudged against it. A warm tongue licked between her fingers and she laughed. "Nell!" A tear escaped down her cheek. She found the furry muzzle, the thick leather velvet ears, and the small tuft at the back of her flat head where the fur changed direction. A rhythmic thud, thud, thud started sounding. "I've never missed you so much, Nell," Calendula sobbed into the Labrador's neck. Nell shifted and let out a yelp. "Careful, Clen. Can she come home now?" Malcolm rubbed her shoulder. "Her foot's still a bit sore, but I don't see why not. Just have to keep it bandaged for a few more days while the bromelain does its job." "Thank you." She turned and hugged Malcolm. "I don't know what I'd have done without you." "Just doing my job. Now why don't you take her for a short walk via the Arboretum on your way back? I know you've got a lot of work to do, but I'm sure the change of scenery will do you both good." Calendula waited for Malcolm to finish up. He handed her a small cylindrical container. "Give her one in the morning and one in the evening. Antibiotics, just because you can't be too careful." "Thanks, Malcolm." She hugged him again and he placed the handle of Nell's harness in her hand. Confident and independent this time, Calendula made her way along the winding corridors with Nell's assistance, slowing on the stairs to allow her injured companion to decide how best to tackle the steps with one injured paw. They sat together in the Arboretum for several minutes, Calendula pondering the strange language she had to decipher, and Nell snuffling among the potted trees and herbs, presumably reacquainting herself with the place after the stink of disinfectant and antibacterial agents. That night, Calendula slept soundly. "So this is it, Clen," Stan said as she arrived on the bridge. "Have you managed to learn anything from it?" "No, but the sounds are definitely a language. I think I can repeat some of them." "Good, because we've just discovered something and it looks like we've got company." Calendula's grip on Nell's harness tightened as the captain described in detail a strange polyhedral framework floating out in space. He also described, poorly, an object that could only be interpreted as a spacecraft hovering close to the frame, apparently carrying out some kind of repair work by means of several suited humanoids. "Humanoids?" Calendula said on the verge of panic. "The aliens are here? What are they like?" "We didn't get much of a look. They disappeared inside the craft just moments after we arrived. That was when they started transmitting to us again." "What do you mean again?" "The first signal stopped when we reached regular velocity." Calendula listened as the chatter on the bridge intensified. "Captain," one of the officers said, "the ship is approaching." Stan's voice crackled with tension. "Ready the railgun. They may be hostile." "Stan, you don't know what they are. They spoke to us first." "I can't take that chance, Calendula. They're heading straight for us." "Captain, please, let me try. Open a radio channel on the same frequency." Stan exhaled sharply. "They're pointing guns at us." "Yes, just like we are." "Fine. Open a channel." The double beep of an open channel sounded, and the bridge fell quiet. Calendula carefully shaped her throat and spoke the first few words from the transmission she'd been studying. Several seconds of silence followed. The comm channel, the other ship, responded with different words, fast, agitated. "They're accelerating," Stan said. Over the comms came a sharp barking sound followed by an indistinct stream of words. The harness in Calendula's hand tugged. Nell barked. The comms fell silent. "Sir, the ship has stopped. They're turning and appear to be opening an airlock." "What?" "They've opened an airlock," said the officer, "and they're moving alongside." Two clearer words came over the channel. "Kuvar Eritu?" At least it sounded like a question. "What are they asking?" Stan's voice was at breaking point. "I don't know. But what's the first question you ask someone you just met?" Calendula paused. "I am Calendula," she said. "My name is Calendula." "Sir, the ship is extending some sort of docking seal over the port airlock in Section 6. "Calendula, you better get down there." "Why me?" "Because it seems like they want to meet you." Almost against her will, Calendula found herself standing next to the inner airlock door. "Send someone else. They wouldn't know it's not me," she said. "You're the only one who studied the recordings," Stan said. "Besides, they only respond to you." Typical reasonable Malcolm. They didn't respond to anyone else. But they went to ram us when I spoke. They also stopped and pulled alongside, so there's something about your voice they obviously like. I can't do it. Calendula sank down beside Nell. She tried to think up an excuse. What if their air is not breathable? You would have to wear a spacesuit, Stan said. But you're in luck. The external door sensor says it's perfectly habitable on the other side. The cameras don't show much though, just darkness. Calendula swallowed past the hard lump of fear in her throat. I can't. Please, Clen, you have to try, Malcolm said. For us. For Earth. She stroked Nell and rose. The hiss of air escaping startled Nell and she backed up a little. Better to leave her here, Stan said. We don't want to scare the aliens. Us? Scare them? Calendula nearly shrieked. How do you think I feel going in there alone? No choice, I'm afraid. Stan took her hand and led her to the door. You can stay just inside the airlock with the outer door open if you want. Calendula swallowed her fear and held out the harness. I knew you could do it, Malcolm said. She stepped through the door and jumped as it closed behind her. The airlock connected to the alien ship was silent. Silent except for a faint sound at the edge of her acute hearing. Breathing. Hello, she said. I'm Calendula. Fear gripped her heart while she waited for a response. For 5 long minutes. Breathing. She activated her comms. Stan, this isn't working, let me out. Give it some time. Breathing. No, Stan, I mean it, open the door now. The airlock hissed open and claws clattered on the metallic floor towards her. Nell, get back here, Stan shouted. The Labrador barked with excitement and nearly bowled Calendula over as she collided with her legs. Gratena, Calendula. Dubi ma, Calendula. Calendula froze at the sound of the alien voice. Nell barked. Gratena. Close it, Stan hissed. The door shut, leaving Calendula and Nell in the airlock corridor. Dubi ma, Calendula. Nell towed Calendula along the airlock until she felt the threshold between ships beneath her feet. The air in the alien ship felt cool, smelled musty, biscuit-like, familiar. Nell tugged in her harness, sniffing the air loudly. She grumbled. A footfall sounded nearby. Nell growled. Calendula crouched and held the Labrador close to her. Shh, Nell, there's a good girl. Nadi, came the deep, growling alien voice. Calendula put a hand over her heart. Calendula, human. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she put her hand on Nell's breast. Nell, dog. The growling voice echoed. Nell, Nadi. Calendula, eager Nadi. Calendula's heart raced. She swallowed. She repeated the gesture, hand on her breast. Calendula, eager Nadi. On Nell's. Nell, Nadi. She extended her hand, hoping the alien would understand. They said the airlock this side was dark after all, and it may be a futile gesture. You? She asked. Ro Nadi. Heavy footfalls, padded steps with a faint clacking, not unlike Nell's skittering claws, approached. Calendula rose, hand still extended. Fur touched her fingertips and she recoiled. Bronadi, the voice said, only inches from her. The breath was hot, smelly, like something familiar. She tentatively reached out again, fighting the urge to draw back as she encountered the fur and ran her hand over it. Bulging muscles lay beneath the coarse hair. As she trailed her fingers upwards, she felt the curve of a neck. The creature drew back. It's okay, she said softly, and bent to stroke Nell's face. Then she reached out again. The fur beneath her hand moved, as though the creature understood her meaning, and her touch met soft, velvety fur, stubbly whiskers, a long muzzle with flap-like lips. Calendula smiled as she ran her fingers lightly upwards and encountered a fuzzy trapezoid ear edged with fine hair. The captain had said humanoid. She ran her hands down the creature's neck, over thick muscles, broad shoulders and strong arms, to hands not unlike her own, but tipped with... She flinched at the sharp claws. The creature growled warmly. Brunadi, Grotena iga Nadi Calendula, or Nadi Nell. The end. This has been Synthesis Pioneer, a short story prequel to the novel Synthesis Weave, written by Rex Dean, narrated by Rex Dean. Copyright 2017 Dean Saunders Stowe. Production copyright 2017 by Forcefield Publishing.